Kästner came to write Emil because it was suggested to him at a party. He placed enormous faith in children and childhood. He once said that most people discard their childhood like an old hat, but only those who retain it can be called truly human. And that phrase, that expression has been, repeated many times because he placed perhaps an over-idealistic faith in children, actually, and in childhood. It is a very German book if you look at that era and what was happening in Germany at that time, which was very politically unstable and very forward-looking in culture, in cultural terms. I mean, I know it wasn't like cabaret all the time, but there was an awful lot happening, especially in Berlin. And Emil is, in a sense, part of that.
The interesting thing, of course, is that it was first published in the early 30s in Berlin, and I think at one point Emil's grandmother refers to President Hindenburg, so it's before Hitler came to power. But we know, looking back on it from our time, that this was going on in the background. There are sinister clouds gathering. There are big threatening things going to come up.
He loved Germany, it's what he felt. He felt it was a good place, but that it had been disrupted in a terrible way by the Nazis, so he stayed. Some people say he stayed in order to look after his mum. That the Emil Tischbein that we know and the Frau Tischbein we know is actually very like Erich Kästner and Frau Kästner.
He couldn't write during the Nazi era. His books were burnt, and he's the only writer to have watched them being burnt by Goebbels. But they didn't touch Emil because it was so popular. And I think, they would have had negative publicity if they had.
I think there's something about the poignancy of knowing when we watch this story what's going to happen to this city and the world that these children are in. There's something about the extraordinary moment of Weimar Germany that is threatened in a way that you can feel in the book, and Kästner knew, and his other books talk about some of the conflicts that were going on, but obviously nobody in the book, and when you look at the film, nobody knows what's coming.
Germany became this terrible thing, inexpressible in a way, that this country or this culture or this regime could have done such damage to Jews and to all the other victims of Nazism. The book, in a sense, stands against that. It stands against it because of who Kästner himself was, the author, but also because of the freedom that is in the book. So in my case, that's what I feel. I feel this is the Germany that is on either side of this terrible period, the Third Reich period. So it's full of hope of what people can be like.
I interviewed a lot of people some time ago for a piece of research I was doing on its reception in the UK. And I can remember at least one instance where someone I interviewed said, well, it really made me think about Germany again. This was 1960-ish, 15 years after the war. And she said it was at the time of the Berlin air blockade, and it made her think differently about Germany and the Germans. It made her see them in a different way. So I think it had a big effect on people's perceptions of Germany.